Welcome back to the Red Zone. Leo Stodder with Joey Dwyer and Joe Kennedy. For our next guest, we'll be joined by our former sports director, former Red Zone host, and current WCIA multimedia journalist, Andy Olson, making his return to the Red Zone. He's here to talk about some Illinois basketball with us because they have a pretty exciting tournament schedule coming up. So let's dive right into this, Andy. How exciting has it been to cover this team this season?
Leo, there's so many ways that I can go about answering that question first. And well, first of all, thank you guys for having me back. It feels good to see what you've done with the place. It's awesome. But this season, I think everyone knew going in that on paper, this team could be really special. You have Ayo Dosunmu returning, Kofi Coburn deciding to come back as well. Two guys that at the during the middle of last season, you kind of expected to move on and start their NBA careers. And the fact that they were able to bring that team back, and part of that reason is because they didn't get the chance to play in the postseason last year. Everything got canceled. They were on a hot streak, if you guys remember. They were the number 4 seed going into the Big Ten tournament last year, and then just didn't get a chance to see what would happen. So the mantra of this season was unfinished business. That's what Ayo Dosunmu keeps calling it. And you can tell that these guys have a chip on their shoulder because of that. You add a couple of top 50 prospects in Adam Miller and Andre Curbelo, and they've really adapted well into the team. They had some freshman growing pains early, like you do with everyone, but they've really found their footing, and this team is peaking at a really good time, winning 13 of 14. Only loss in that stretch was at Michigan State, where Ayo Dosunmu, who is known for closing out games, was concussed for the last 3 to 4 minutes. So this team is looking really good. It's been so exciting going to the games, and it's something that I don't take lightly, that I get the chance to actually see this team in person. It's really weird seeing the State Farm Center empty. I haven't been to a game when State Farm Center is full. My first game was when it was this season. So I definitely do not take it for granted. The fact that I get to see this team, because I know there's so many Illini fans out there that wish they could be there. So it's been very exciting, and I'm excited to see where this team goes, because as you guys know, when you have a fun team to cover, it's always fun to be a journalist.
And so you mentioned that how hot the Illini were in the last stretch of the season. You said 13 or 14. They absolutely dominated the Big Ten tournament. What kind of came, or what was the influence that kind of turned the season around from? They had that early loss to Baylor, which was kind of tough, and some other things that went wrong, but they really turned it around. I guess they were always good, but
oh, absolutely.
But they really picked it up. So what was the kind of the change in mentality there?
I think part of it was those freshmen growing into their roles. Adam Miller has been a starter all year, but he has never in his life been a guy that's had to worry about defense. He's come up through the high school ranks and the AAU ranks, just being the best scorer. And he had to find his own role in this team. Andre Curbelo had to find his role coming off the bench. And being able to learn from those losses, I think, has been huge for this team. If this team was undefeated going into the NCAA tournament, I would not be as probably high on them as I am right now, just because they've had to go through those experiences. You mentioned Baylor. They got exposed. They hung with them for about 25 to 30 minutes before Baylor went on a run, and Illinois was just never able to get back into it. So Brad Underwood, the head coach for the team, has talked all this season about learning from those experiences. And there have been a couple of times this season where they haven't played to their full potential, almost playing down to their opponent. I think, specifically about the loss at home to Maryland, which Maryland ended up making the tournament at a time that was a pretty bad loss. I believe everyone that Illinois lost to this season is in the NCAA tournament, but you'll have to check me on that. That's just off the top of my head. They only have 6 losses. But Joey, to answer your question, I think it was those growing pains into these guys' own roles. Jacob Grandison, a guy who had to sit out last season, finding his way into the starting lineup, has been super important for them, having that kind of stretch 4 that can be on the floor with the 3 other guards and Kofi. So I think it has been about learning from those losses, getting sound defensively. They've been good all year defensively, but they've really found themselves at the very end. And I think that has a lot to do with them being able to play defense at a really high level, and those freshmen really contributing more than they were at the beginning of the year.
Do you think any of it has to do maybe even with Ayo getting out and being injured? Because I feel like that gave the opportunity for Miller and Curbelo to step up. And especially after that Michigan State game, it seems like they've been on a roll with or without Ayo. Do you think that benefited the Illini, even with Io breaking his nose, putting on the Batman mask? Do you think it helps him?
Absolutely, 100%, Joe. When Io went out, you looked at that end of the season stretch. So he missed Nebraska at home, which was not a super important game, but it was senior night, and he was honored as a junior because everyone knows he's leaving after this season. Then it was at Wisconsin, who was ranked at the time, and then at Michigan, who was only had one loss in the Big Ten at the time. So everyone looked at Io going out at that point as a death sentence for the Illini. That, okay, hopefully they can still make it to Friday because only the top 4 seeds make it there. And I mean, it looked like 3 losses to end the year: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Michigan. Who'd I miss there? I missed one. Nebraska. Yeah, I got it. So the way that they were, like you mentioned, Joe, the way that they were able to step up into those roles is so much more important in this postseason play now, because there were points early in the year where Io just had to be that closer and be that guy to win the game for the team. He had so many of those winning moments where he just had to put the team on his back. When they had those games where they didn't have him, I think they learned so much about themselves as a team that's going to benefit them in the NCAA tournament. I think that showed in the Big Ten tournament final against Ohio State, where the Buckeyes came back from down 17 and forced overtime. It wasn't just up to Iowa in that game to keep Illinois going. You had your DeMonte Williams hitting big threes, Trent Frazier playing lockdown defense. That all comes from having to play without Io for those few games. And that's, I think, where you can really learn a lot about yourself as a team, that if you can still win without, I would say, because I saw him play in person all year, I would call him the player of the year in college basketball. If you can still win without that guy, you're a pretty damn good team. And they showed a lot in that stretch. And I think that, like you mentioned, can only benefit them moving forward in the postseason.
So now moving into the postseason, what would you say, now that this team's kind of found their identity, what is the X factor they have that maybe no other team in the nation has that could propel them on a run this postseason?
We've been talking about it a lot, and it just comes down to Io DeSumo. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the compilations of all the times that he's closed out a game. He is the closer in college basketball. I am jaded by my Chicago sports fandom that when the team is down and out or things are getting closer, you're like, okay, my team's going to lose. And covering Illinois, I get that same feeling from watching my own teams. Like, there's no way Io can pull this out again. Something's going to go wrong. But every single time, the final 2 minutes, Io DeSumo finds a way to win. And he calls that the Mamba mentality. Kobe Bryant was his favorite player growing up. And you can see that in the mentality that he brings to this team. That, I think, is going to be the key difference for Illinois. He is the X factor. He is the player of the year. And I know Luka Garza is most likely going to win. Terrific player. Love Luka Garza. He's very, very good. But Io DeSumo and his ability to close out games, and that's what you need in the NCAA tournament, a guy in your team who refuses to lose. And that's exactly what Io is. So that's why I think the people should be watching out for the Illini in the next month.
So going into March Madness right now, they have they're matched up against Drexel in the first game. So hopefully that's an easy win. But moving forward, they've got some teams who are really good. Like you mentioned, Iowa's in there, Missouri, who defeated them earlier in the season. And then Georgetown, who came in as a 12, but had an awesome run in the Big East tournament. Are there some matchups that, as an Illini supporter as well as a reporter, that you're a little concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you bring up the Illini supporter because I grew up as an Illinois fan. Of course, went to Illinois State because I fell in love with the broadcast program there. So the Illini supporter is fallen off a bit, but I can still feel that, and I can sympathize with Illini Nation when I watch these games, which I think helps me in my reporting because I know what they're going through a little bit. So I was saying in the Big Ten tournament when I was over there in Indy that there were a couple of teams that I did not want to see in Illinois' part of the bracket just because I knew how good they were. Those teams were Loyola, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia. All three of them are in Illinois' part of the bracket. First of all, I mean, Loyola as an 8 seed is just so bad. I don't know what the tournament committee was thinking there. Loyola is at least a 5 or a 6, in my opinion. They are really good. Cameron Krutwig, who was a third-team All-American this year, to get them in the round of 32 stinks. It stinks for me as a fan of the MVC, so I want to see Loyola make a deep run, but I don't think that they'll beat Illinois. Illinois will definitely be challenged there, and that's what you're going to want to get, as you get to the Final Four and things like that. But Cade Cunningham and Oklahoma State are on such a bender right now. They are so good at the moment. And then Bob Huggins, who Brad Underwood used to coach under, you could possibly get in the Elite Eight. There are so many interesting storylines and matchups, and not to mention Oklahoma State. Brad Underwood coached there for a year before leaving for Illinois. So the fans in Stillwater, not very big fans of Underwood, and I imagine that still holds true to this moment. So there are some teams there that can definitely give them some tough matchups. But when it comes down to it, the only 2 teams that I think can win the national championship this year are Illinois and Gonzaga. I don't think anyone really comes close to where they are at the moment.
So I was going to ask you your Final Four prediction, but it sounds like you already gave us 2 in Illinois and Gonzaga. So who else do you see getting into the Final Four and winning the chip?
So if we'll go to the East, which is where Michigan is the number 1, I think Isaiah Livers being out for the Wolverines is going to be very bad for them. They have really relied on Livers a lot this year, and I think they're susceptible to being the first number 1 seed knocked out of the tournament. I'm not saying that it could be in the round of 32. I've predicted it in the round of 32. I think the Bonnies could get it done. But coming out of the East, I have Alabama. I really like what they're doing down there. I mean, they've really become the kings of the SEC this year. And I think that has a lot to do with experience versus those usual blue bloods relying on first-year talent. When you have so much experience coming back because of the pandemic, you're going to be much better than those kids coming out of high school, which isn't normally the case in college basketball. I think the Blue Bloods come back next year, but for this year, Alabama has just a ton of experience. And then in the South, I mean, I know Baylor has been really good all year, but we've seen them start to slip at the end of the year against Kansas, and then again in the Big 12 tournament against Oklahoma State. So I had them getting to the Elite Eight, but I think Ohio State's going to come out of that one. EJ Liddell, who is an Illinois native, is so good for the Buckeyes. We saw them go head-to-head with Illinois in the Big Ten final, not going down and out after being down 17. I think Ohio State's really good. So that is my 4: Gonzaga, Bama, Ohio State, and Illinois.
And so, Andy, one question I got to ask.
Sure.
Can anyone stop Kofi Cockburn? Is it possible? Because I don't think it possibly is. Maybe foul trouble. That's the only thing.
Joe, at the beginning of the year, I would have said yes, because as I think you guys have heard many times, Illinois fans have heard many times, even just college basketball fans have heard many times, the kid's only been playing basketball for about 4 or 5 years. He only picked it up within the last half decade down in Jamaica before moving to New York, where he went to high school. So at the beginning of the year, I thought the way that he moved his feet, the way that he was able to handle the ball was really just raw. And there were points in the year where he was making mistakes. The ball was getting out of his hands. He was making silly turnovers. He wasn't passing out from the post, which was a big issue. I thought that he has a lot to learn. And then we fast forward to the end of the year where he's second in the nation in double doubles. And he has the Big Ten tournament that he does, where he just dominates Iowa, has an incredible second half against Rutgers, and is huge for the Illini and a really team effort against Ohio State. I would say at this point, no, I don't think so. How can you stop a guy who's 7 foot, 285 pounds? I mean, they call him Lil Shaq for a reason. And at this point, I'm going to go with no, Joe. And to have that combo of Io and Kofi, there's not a lot of combos like that out in the country right now.